AITA for exposing my fiancée after she changed our prenup to take my business? I am 34 years old. I own a chain of 12 organic food markets distributed across 3 states, and 6 months ago, I was about to marry the woman I thought was the love of my life. I built this business from the ground up over 10 years. I started with a small location in a strip mall that did not even have central air conditioning and scaled it little by little until turning it into an enterprise worth several $1,000,000. I never imagined that someone would try to take it all away from me, much less the person with whom I planned to share the rest of my life. I met Jessica about 3 years ago at one of those tedious business conferences in Chicago where everyone pretends to be deeply interested in the keynote speeches, but in reality, they only attend for the networking and the open bar. She worked as a social media marketer for fashion brands. She was 29, and honestly, she seemed incredible to me from the very first moment. She was smart, witty, and ambitious. She seemed to understand my obsession with work because she was also building her career in the city. We spent 2 years dating before I proposed to her. When I did, I felt like I was doing everything right, that I had finally found someone who truly understood me. When we started planning the wedding, naturally the topic of the prenuptial agreement came up. It was not something I pulled out of nowhere to be controlling or distrustful. It was simply logical, considering that I had a business entity I had incorporated long before meeting her. My attorney, who has helped me since I opened the 3rd location, told me it was standard procedure for business owners, and I explained it to Jessica in the most transparent way possible. I told her that this was not because I lacked trust in her or because I anticipated a divorce. It was solely to protect the assets I had established prior to our relationship. She understood it perfectly. In fact, she stated that it seemed completely reasonable to her and that she had no issue with it. She even joked that if she had a fashion empire, she would do exactly the same thing. We spent roughly 2 months reviewing the terms of the agreement with our respective legal counsels. I was more than fair. Honestly, the prenup basically stated that the corporation and all assets related to the stores remained my separate property, but anything we acquired together during the marriage would be considered marital property and divided equally. It also included a clause stating that if the marriage lasted more than 10 years, she would receive a generous settlement. I was not trying to cut her out. I just wanted to protect what had taken me a decade to build. Jessica signed without any drama, and I thought that this was exactly how a mature partnership should function. But then, about 9 months ago, her brother Kyle returned to town. I do not even know where to start with Kyle. He is 37 years old and is already navigating his 3rd divorce. 3 failed marriages before 40. He has also launched 5 or 6 startups that failed miserably, including an investment firm that faced serious allegations regarding the mismanagement of client funds. Jessica always defended him, saying that he had bad luck and that the economy did not favor him, but I knew the guy was a liability. I never liked him, but I also did not think he would go to such extremes. When Kyle returned to the suburbs after his 3rd divorce, he stayed with Jessica's parents temporarily while he was supposedly looking for employment and reorganizing his life. He started appearing at all the family barbecues, at dinners, and in our weekend plans. I noticed that Jessica was spending more and more time with him. At first, I did not think much of it. I thought he was being a supportive big brother, helping her with the wedding logistics. But then her behavior started to change in ways that are incredibly obvious in hindsight, but at the moment, I did not see them coming. Jessica started spending money like never before. When I say spending, I mean significant amounts on completely unnecessary luxury items. She bought designer handbags from 5th Avenue that cost the same as the monthly inventory of one of my smaller locations, and shoes that were worth more than the bi-weekly paycheck of some of my staff. I asked her what was happening, and she said she was investing in her professional image. She claimed she needed to look the part for her high-end fashion clients. It made sense superficially, I guess, but it was excessive and frequent. She also started asking me strange questions about the business. These were not the casual type like before, such as asking how my day went. She made very specific inquiries about profit margins, vendor contracts, expansion blueprints, and financial details that had never interested her. Once she asked me for the specific net income of each individual store. When I asked her why she needed to know that, she got defensive, claiming she was only trying to understand my world better because we were becoming a team. I felt guilty for questioning her. I thought I was being the paranoid and controlling fiancé. The strangest development was when she started suggesting that she wanted a role in the C-suite after the wedding. She said she could manage the social media for the entire chain, that she had ideas for national marketing campaigns, and that we could be a power couple. I explained to her that we already had a marketing department and that my executive assistant, Sarah, was in charge of coordinating those efforts. Jessica insisted that she could contribute much more, that she had industry connections, and that she could scale the business. She became almost obsessive with the subject. When I told her no, she would get angry and accuse me of not valuing her professional skills. About 6 months ago, 2 months before the wedding, my attorney called me saying he needed to review something urgent with me. I went to his office downtown thinking it was some minor paperwork related to the lease agreements for the new stores we were planning for next year. But when I arrived and saw his expression, I knew something was wrong. He showed me the prenuptial agreement that was supposedly finalized, except it was not the same document we had signed months ago. Someone had modified the terms, and the alterations were drastic. The new agreement stipulated that Jessica would have the right to 50% of my business equity in the event of a divorce, regardless of the marriage's duration. But it was not just that. It also included clauses that gave her rights over future subsidiaries and over any new ventures related to organic food that I established. It basically converted her into a full partner in everything I had built and what I would build in the future. My attorney was irate because he said those modifications had been sent from Jessica's email with a note claiming they were just minor clarifications that we had both agreed upon verbally. I sat there unable to speak, feeling as if someone had physically struck me. That night, I confronted Jessica at our apartment. I showed her the documents and asked her what was going on. She went pale for a second, but then regained her composure. She started saying that they were just standard protections, that her legal advisor had recommended those updates, and that she did not understand why I was so upset. I told her they were not standard protections and that she was essentially attempting to acquire my business. She started crying, saying that I did not trust her, that I was being paranoid, and that she would never do something malicious. But I did not believe her anymore. Something in her demeanor felt rehearsed. The situation escalated when she appeared, unannounced, at a quarterly meeting I had with potential angel investors for a new product line. She entered the boardroom confidently, introduced herself as my future wife and business partner, and started offering opinions on market strategy that were completely off base. The investors looked at each other, clearly uncomfortable, and I had to escort her out as professionally as possible. Afterward, she shouted at me in the parking lot, claiming that I was humiliating her, that she had a right to be in those meetings, and that soon she would be part of the board. It was alarming because I no longer recognized the person I had planned to marry. What I did not know at that moment was that Kyle had been influencing Jessica's parents and her whole family, filling their heads with false narratives about me. He told them that I was financially controlling, that I did not value Jessica, and that I was using her only as a trophy while I built my empire. He painted a picture for them where I was the villain who refused to share his success with the woman he loved. Jessica's parents, who had always been wonderful to me, started treating me coldly. They made passive-aggressive comments about how successful men in America should support their wives' ambitions. I decided to investigate further. I asked Kyle to grab a coffee, keeping it casual, just to talk. I went with my phone recording in my pocket. I know the laws regarding recording conversations vary by state, but at that point, I needed to know the truth for my own protection. Kyle basically confessed everything without much pressure. He told me that Jessica deserved a stake in my success, that I had been selfish with the original prenup, and that after the wedding he expected to be appointed to a senior management position, maybe as director of operations. He said it casually, as if it were a done deal. He talked to me about his expansion plans for my stores and how he planned to leverage my supply chain to launch his own side projects. It was surreal listening to him discuss my assets as if they already belonged to his portfolio. 2 days later, Sarah called me on a Sunday night, which was extremely rare because she strictly adheres to office hours unless it is an emergency. She told me she had found Kyle in my office trying to access my desktop computer. The security guard had seen him and intervened, but he had managed to review some files before he was escorted off the premises. The worst part is that Jessica had given him the security codes. She had been sharing confidential trade secrets with him for weeks, maybe months. This included contracts, financial spreadsheets, supplier data, expansion strategies, basically everything. They had been conducting unauthorized surveillance on my company. At that moment, I knew I had to end the relationship. I could not marry someone who was actively conspiring against my interests. It did not matter how much I had loved her or how much I had invested emotionally. So, with my attorney, we drafted a formal email canceling the wedding. We included all the evidence of the document tampering, the recording of the conversation with Kyle, and the access logs showing that Jessica had shared proprietary information. It was the most difficult email I have ever had to write, but also the most necessary. Jessica's response was erratic. Instead of apologizing or admitting to her actions, she went into retaliation mode. She was an authorized user on one of my emergency credit cards that I had given her strictly for safety, and in 3 days, she charged $12,000. $12,000 in 72 hours. She bought jewelry, designer clothing, high-end furniture, art pieces, and first-class plane tickets to Europe she never used. It was as if she were trying to punish me financially. I called her when I saw the fraud alerts, and she was literally in a luxury boutique buying her 5th handbag of the day. She told me she deserved it for the emotional distress I had caused her, for humiliating her by canceling the wedding, and for ruining her life. I told her I was removing her authorization from the account that very instant, and she started screaming that I could not do that because she still had purchases to make. I hung up and called the bank immediately. I can still hear her shouting through the phone. But then something unexpected happened. Megan, Jessica's younger sister, contacted me. She had always been the most pragmatic member of the family. She worked as a certified public accountant and never got involved in drama. She told me she needed to see me urgently and that she had discovered something significant. We met at a coffee shop far from her family's neighborhood, and she arrived with a laptop. It was Kyle's laptop that he had apparently left at their parents' house. Megan had found it and logged in because she suspected something unethical was occurring. What she found was basically the complete blueprint of the scheme. Kyle had created folders with names like Store Acquisition Plan and Marriage Strategy. There were spreadsheets detailing the valuation of my business, growth projections, and an analysis of how to divide assets post-divorce. There was a timeline showing every step of the plan, from when Kyle returned to town to the planned wedding date and beyond. It even contained emails with a disreputable lawyer who had helped him draft the altered prenup, someone willing to commit fraud for a fee. The most disturbing part was that Kyle had been planning this for months, probably since before I proposed. There were notes on how to manipulate Jessica, how to convince her that she deserved equity, and how to use her affection for me as leverage. There was even a document titled Vulnerabilities, where he listed my insecurities and how to exploit them. It was pathological. Megan was crying when she showed it to me, saying she could not believe her brother was capable of such malice. I asked her if Jessica knew all this from the beginning or if Kyle had manipulated her too. Megan said she honestly did not know. She said Jessica had changed a lot in recent months and that she thought Kyle had exerted undue influence over her. She said Jessica had always idolized her older brother and defended him regardless of his failures. I made a digital copy of the drive before Megan returned the laptop to her parents because I knew I would need that evidence for any potential legal battles. When Jessica's parents saw what was on that computer, the dynamic shifted immediately. Mrs. Miller called me in tears, apologizing for having doubted my character, saying that Kyle had deceived them all. Mr. Miller came personally to my corporate office to tell me that he fully supported my decision to terminate the engagement and that he would have done the same. They asked Kyle to leave their home and cut off his financial support. Jessica tried to contact me about 2 weeks after the fallout. She arrived at my house without notice, looking exhausted, saying that she finally understood what Kyle had done and that she had also been a victim of his manipulation. She claimed she truly loved me, that she never wanted to seize my business, and that she only wanted to be involved in my life in a meaningful way. But even in that moment, she could not completely accept responsibility. She kept justifying her actions, arguing that I had also been at fault for being so guarded with my business affairs. I told her that regardless of Kyle's influence, she had actively made decisions to betray my trust. She had submitted fraudulent legal documents, she had shared confidential trade secrets, and she had spent over $12,000 in revenge. Those were her choices. I told her that maybe a part of her was a victim, but another part was absolutely complicit, and that was enough for me to close that chapter permanently. Jessica attempted one last legal maneuver by hiring another attorney who argued that she deserved compensation for emotional distress and for the time invested in the relationship. It was a baseless claim. My attorney dismantled their argument in the first hearing by presenting the evidence of the fraud, the recordings, and the files from Kyle's laptop. The case was dismissed rapidly. Kyle faced much more serious consequences. It turned out he was not just trying to take over my business through Jessica, but he had been selling the confidential information she passed to him to some of my local competitors. The district attorney labeled it corporate espionage. Now he potentially faces federal charges and prison time, and the companies that purchased the stolen data are under investigation as well. His life has unraveled completely. I had to overhaul all the security protocols in my stores after this incident. I implemented new passcodes, biometric access systems, and complete audits of everyone with access to sensitive financial data. Sarah was exceptional during the whole process, helping me reorganize operations while I processed the personal betrayal. I gave her a significant year-end bonus because I do not know what I would have done without her diligence. Now, 6 months later, I am focused completely on expanding the brand. I am going to open 3 new locations next year, including one in a state where we have never had a presence. Romantic relationships are not a priority for me right now. My friends try to convince me to get back out there, but I am still healing. It is not just the betrayal. It is the realization that the person I thought I knew did not really exist. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had married her without discovering the scheme. How long would the marriage have lasted before she filed for divorce to claim half the assets? A year, 2 years? Kyle probably had a calculated timeline to maximize their payout. It is terrifying to think about how close I was to losing a decade of hard work to people who viewed me as a financial resource rather than a partner. Last week, my mother asked me if I was ever going to forgive Jessica. I told her that forgiveness and trust are 2 different concepts. Maybe one day I can let go of the resentment for my own peace of mind, but I will never be able to trust her again, and without trust, there is no foundation for a relationship. My mother nodded, but I know she worries that I will end up alone, surrounded by my business. I do not know what the future holds, but I know that I built something real with my own effort, something worth protecting. If that means being more cautious about who I let into my life, or having stricter legal agreements, then so be it. I can live without a relationship, but I cannot live knowing I handed over my life's work to someone who never truly valued me. Comment. It is never easy to realize that the people we trust most might not have our best interests at heart. Building a life you are proud of takes immense effort, and protecting that hard work is not selfish, but a form of self-respect. True love honors your boundaries and celebrates your success rather than treating it like a resource to be used. When your intuition whispers that something feels off, listening to that inner voice can save you from years of heartache. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself so you can find peace, but trust is a privilege others must earn through consistent, honest actions. It is perfectly okay to step back, take time for yourself, and rebuild your emotional foundation before letting anyone else in. Walking away from a toxic situation requires immense courage, yet it is often the most important step toward genuine happiness. Do not let one painful experience close your heart forever, but let it teach you the real value of transparency and loyalty. I hope you find the strength to prioritize your well-being and surround yourself with people who truly cherish you for who you are. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.